Hey everybody, it's Avi Tenenbaum. In this video, I want to wrap up shovevim. We're not going to talk about shovevim anymore. There's a time and place for everything. We're going to move topics to something else. I want to tell you what we're going to do next, what to expect in the next few weeks, Be'ezras Hashem. So, we spoke a lot about shovevim, yetzer hara, kedusha, temptation, lust, and all this. And we're going to finish that today. The last thing we have to do is somebody asked an interesting question. We're going to try to answer it today. And then we're going to move on. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a little break and we're going to make some preparations to make TFRP even better. There's a very special camera coming on the way from the United States. We live in Israel here. But hopefully we're going to start to make videos that are appealing and better than just the audiograms that we've been making until now. Nicer to watch, more interesting. The next topic that we're probably going to move into after all this stuff that we did is emunah and bitachon, faith during hard times. A lot of people in TFRP requested this. The world looks like it's heading in a not simple direction right now. So this is a great time to prepare about emunah, bitachon, faith, adversity, resilience, trauma, grief, meaning, all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff ahead of us that we're going to talk about. Okay, so we're going to be finishing shovevim now. We're going to be answering the last question that a person in TFRP asked us to talk about. Taking a little break. During the break, I might ask you guys to help me partake in letting more people know about TFRP because this is not something I make money on. This is just a hobby and a mitzvah that I feel is really special. I get all sorts of feedback from people. They say, wow, this video really helped me to start keeping Shabbos. This video helped me understand that the Torah really appreciates my struggle. It validates me. It gives me a reason to live. Another person said, this helped me keep a certain mitzvah that I haven't kept in many decades. Another person said, nobody ever made this certain topic that you spoke about this week ever make sense from my experience until I heard this video. So, I'm in the same boat with everybody else, and I'm just sharing things that gave me a lot of inspiration on my level in the real world. I'm a real person with real problems, and that's what TFRP is all about. Torah for real people, TFRP, right? So without any further ado, let's jump in. So somebody asked me, Avi, can you talk about how yeshivas and seminaries in the yeshiva world deal with sexual issues, with the yetzer hara, with temptation, shovevim? This is the last thing we're talking about on this topic. Don't worry, for now at least. Li neder, unless things change, because sometimes things change. But are the yeshivas doing it the right way? Can you comment on that? So, I'm not a spokesman of the whole Jewish world, and I'm no expert, and I'm not a Rosh Yeshiva, not a Gadol. I'm a very simple person. And what I could do is, instead of rating the yeshivas and seminaries and saying they're doing, 6 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10, I can talk about some things that are related to this that I think I could talk about. So, from the time of Chazal, we already see that sexuality has to be taught in a careful, sensitive way. And the reason why is, first of all, because it's such a holy, incredible power. And it's something that can be used to create children, to create life, and it can also be something that can be misused. And Chazal say that anytime there's an opportunity to be lustful and to be promiscuous and to do things like this and to use the sexual side of us in the wrong way, it is exactly there that there's a huge opportunity to become holy. That's what gives us kedusha. That's what Chazal says. So it's two sides of this coin. So imagine there's this incredible energy, and you can use this energy to blow up an entire city, wipe everybody out, give them cancer, and just decimate them in a nuclear bomb. Or you can use the same energy to power the town, power the hospital, power the ramzorim. How did they say ramzorim? I'm forgetting my English. The traffic lights in the schools, in your homes, and to give electricity so that you can operate your computer and your fan and your refrigerator and to be productive and to live life. So sexuality is a powerful source of energy. It's a certain part of us that Hashem gave to us, and we're very inclined to misuse it because we said in previous videos that the yetzer hara, the biggest yetzer hara that we have, are in these issues. So we have to be careful, and Chazal knew this, and there are many Chazals to this effect, and therefore Chazal say, when you teach this, and you're a Rav, you're a Talmud Chacham, and you're teaching these halachos, you have to teach them sensitively. You have to teach them in a very particular way. And of course, it's easy as a professional. I can read articles and spit them back, and we can talk about all sorts of interesting things. If there's a purpose for it, maybe we'll do it sometime in a certain way. But it's no chachma, it's a no-brainer, as they say, to just bring a bunch of sexologists on here and just talk about sexual things. That's not the point. The point is, how do you do it? How does the Torah say to do it? How much? To who? When? Where? For what purpose? And so that's the point. The point is, I'm not going to measure how yeshivas do it, but I'm going to say that you see already from the time of Chazal, it has to be done in a sensitive, measured way. Just like if you have any powerful resource, you channel it, you use it in a planned fashion. You bring engineers, you bring scientists, and you say, okay, we have this thing, let's relate to it with reverence, let's relate to it with kavod, with caution, and then think how to do this. It's not just something you do off the cuff, and it's not taboo that we're not talking about anything and everything under the sun over here with full explicit detail. And it's not because I'm afraid to talk about those things. And if you knew what I did all day professionally, I deal with all sorts of stuff that if you heard some of the stories that we deal with, it would make you faint. So it's not a matter of being uncomfortable to say certain things or taboo or some cultural thing. It's not about that. It's about the Torah prescribes that when we talk about sexual matters, we do it in a certain respectful, sensitive manner. We do this with certain judgment, and we have to take a lot of things into consideration. And again, I'm not rating now yeshivas do it good, they do it bad, they should do it this way, that way. Okay, that's not my place to say that, but I am going to comment sviv this topic, surrounding this topic. So that's the first thing that I want to say. And the second thing is, I think that this topic and this question touches on leadership, because there is a challenge. A lot of people don't even know what they don't know. So there's a lot of critics that come out there and say, oh, yeshivas should do this, and seminaries should do this, and the community should do that, and the government should do this. And if you look in the Gemara says, Ein maspikin, I'm not feeling so good, so I'm going to skip the actual quote. It says in Chazal that Chalaga shel rishus, the responsibility, the amount of factors and details and information that governments, that leaders, that Rosh Yeshivas, CEOs, that they have to research and collect and analyze and take into account, and the decisions that they have to make, it's overwhelming. And if you've never been in a high-level position of management or leadership, which I have been, these are hard things to do. You have to know your crowd, you have to know your generation, you have to know their needs, you have to hear different levels of communication from top to bottom and kind of understand who you're dealing with and what needs to be said and how and when. And there's things that leaders are privy to that you're not privy to. And so it's so easy for people today to use social media and say, oh, the Rabbanim are doing this thing, and you should be doing this, thing like this and like that, and sniveling and complaining. It's not so simple. It's not so simple. Leadership is a complex skill. Now, I'm not saying because of that everybody's perfect and everything's perfect. I'm not naive. I'm extremely privy to things that maybe can be improved. I'm in communication with all sorts of people, and we talk together how to make the kehila better and more professional and healthier and holier, and there's what to improve. But it's easy just to come judge. So I want to say, let me give you a glimpse of what some Rabbanim that I've discussed these things with, what they have to contend with when talking about these issues, okay? So again, I'm not their spokesman, and you can speak to them, so please go right ahead. But I've had many conversations with big Talmidei Chachamim, world-class people, chashuv people that deal with these topics, and I said, why do you deal with it this way? Why not that way? What's the concept behind this? And so on. So let me just give you a glimpse in that quickly, and then we're going to wrap this up. So there's a concept in Judaism called tradition, mesora, okay? Not everybody has a tradition. And if you become religious yesterday and learn all of Shas and know it by heart, and Shulchan Aruch and know that by heart, you have no tradition. You haven't studied by a living person who teaches you the contextual knowledge and information from his Rebbe, from his Rebbe, from his Rebbe, that comes to qualify what you learned. So let's say you've read all these different books and you're very book smart and you're brilliant, but you've never done what's called in the Torah shimush chachamim. You've never found an expert in a certain area that you're reading books about and said, okay, I read the Shulchan Aruch on this topic, I read Shas, Rishonim, Achronim, but what did your teachers hand down to you from the previous generation about this topic? What was the context? What was the fifth chelek of Shulchan Aruch, the spirit of the law, the context that comes to qualify it, the stories, the history that comes to bring color and inject color and detail into this topic? Because every topic in Judaism, you can read about it in books, but you can't read the tradition about it in books. And that tradition is handed down from one living person to the other throughout the generations. I'm going to give an example only because it's close to my heart. If you see behind me, I have thousands of Sfarim, and my father, who should be blessed in America, has one of the biggest Sfarim collections in the frum world. Okay, so Sfarim, we love Sfarim, we love tzaddikim, talmidei chachamim of all types. We read everything, we're open-minded, and we want to share the Torah of Sfardim, Ashkenazim, Litvish, Hasidish, Yeke. If it's somebody that's close to Hashem and has what to share, we read it. So Reb Nachman of Breslov has incredible Sfarim that way, which I'm not showing you now, but like all the way, how do I point my finger? That way. And one of my bookshelves, I have Breslov Sfarim, okay? So we read the Breslov Sfarim. Reb Nachman of Breslov died 220 plus years ago. So that's great. So you can read some books today, buy them in your local bookstore. What did Reb Nachman say about this? What did he say about that? Some of these books are translated in English. Wonderful. You know what the problem is? Some people that teach his teachings do not have a tradition, do not have the oral tradition, the context that comes to qualify what you're reading in a book. Okay? So let's say Rabbi Nachman wrote something in Likutei Moharan, in Sichos Haran, he said something. And sounds wonderful, and you're positive that you know what he means. But the thing is this, you never studied by a living person who heard from that person, who heard from that person, from that person, from that person, from Rabbi Nachman himself, that Rabbi Nachman once said, oh, when I wrote this, I meant that. You know, when you read what I wrote over here, don't make this mistake and misunderstand me, but instead understand me like this. There's a lot of things like that. And there's a lot of things that, you know, people over the generations, they read something in a book, but the minute wasn't that way. The custom is not that way for whatever reason. There's tons of things like this. So that's why I said in a previous video in TFRP, from a very esoteric, fascinating Rebbe of mine that I had when I was younger, he said, Sfarim are for Yisayimim, books are for orphans, which means books are important, but after you read books, you have to have an oral tradition on things. Now, what does this have to do with shovevim and sexuality? Let me explain to you. Because I spoke to many big talmidei chachamim about shovevim, and I said, how do we deal with Moitzi Zar Levatala in yeshivas? How do we talk about masturbation? How do we talk about pornography? How do we talk about internet? How do we talk about, you know, histakelis biarayos and machshavos ros and all the topics that we struggle with? How do we talk about that? So a lot of talmidei chachamim told me, I can't answer you because I could spit you book knowledge, I could spit that out easily, but I don't have a tradition that qualifies how to do this. And because I never learned a specific tradition that qualifies the book knowledge that I have, and it's a sensitive topic, and I could say it over wrongly from the book knowledge because books could be misunderstood. So I can't answer you. Go to somewhere else. And I heard this from numerous talmidei chachamim, and that came to create a real appreciation for me that oral tradition is important by everything, but especially important in sensitive topics like this. That's also why, if you ever noticed, if you're a Sfarim enthusiast, if there's such a thing, and you want to buy Sfarim on Kedusha, you want to buy Sfarim on these topics, they are very hard to find. They're often only sold at home. Yeah, sometimes a Talmud Chacham has an oral tradition, he interviewed a bunch of tzaddikim, he wrote a book, and it's sitting in his house, and that's where he sells it. It's not for sale everywhere. He wants you to work a little bit hard to come and buy that sefer from his house. And you have to know where to get it, how to get it, because if you just buy the book easily, you're going to misunderstand what's written in that book. So that book is like an army manual, and sometimes those books are declassified, but sometimes army manuals are for army men, army professionals, right? because we want a lieutenant and a sergeant and a colonel and a general to read that manual, because he's going to understand and have the sensitivity of what's written in there. And every Tom, Dick, and Harry who, buys a gun yesterday and thinks he's, Rambo, he's not going to understand what's written in that manual. He's going to do irresponsible things. So it's not taboo. It's part of it is about Kedusha, but part of it is also about just simply misunderstanding things. And there's so many books today written by people that are so empty and they're so far away from the topic of Kedusha. And I am way far away from Kedusha, but I at least know that it exists and want it. And I may never get Kedusha, but I try. I want it. I believe that maybe Hashem will let me be zocha a little bit to break out of my chains of the things I struggle with and to be, a great person. So if you don't have that sensitivity, you're going to read the words and completely misinterpret them. And the Chazal tell us, and the Halacha tells us, if you learn Even Ezer, they tell us over and over, these halachos can be misconstrued. People have an inclination to, want to permit anything and everything under the sun for everybody and to just allow everything. We want to throw the shackles off of us and we want to enjoy that part of who we are. And this is the greatest pleasure, physical pleasure that there is. There's nothing shameful about that. Go watch all the TFRP videos we had till now about the point of that and how Hashem made that and what was the reason. But the point is, you approach it with carefulness, okay? So once you have mesora, let's say you do have an oral tradition on this, it's still not enough. I'm going to make it more complex, because what happens is, you've got a tradition about how to understand Hilchos Shabbos, and the year is 1850, okay? And then a bunch of years come later on, and electricity is invented, and eventually electricity comes to the domestic house of people like you and me. Well, now, how do you relate to electricity and halacha? There's no tradition on that. It's a new invention. So maybe the old constructs in halacha help us understand. It's bone, it's fire, it's this, it's that. But first of all, some people don't have tradition. And second of all, if you do have tradition, it still doesn't help you with new things. So internet is new, dating apps is new, WhatsApp is new, Facebook is new. So what do you do now? You have this whole tradition on how to teach Bachrim about how to deal with Kedushas Habris. That's wonderful. Kol hakavod, that's great. But what do you do in this generation? And as we go on every 2-3 years, there's new mind-blowing technologies and new things that nobody could have expected. What do we do? The Chavetz Chaim never spoke about WhatsApp. The Chavetz Chaim never spoke about Facebook. So now what? So this is a fascinating thing. I spoke to a very chashuv Talmud Chacham a few days ago. It was Sunday night, and he said, if you have a tradition on something, so this is what you do. You try to get a tradition on the topic that you want to know about, right? So how do we teach sexuality and Kedushas Habris to Bachrim, to seminary girls, whoever it is, whatever? First, learn all the books on that, obviously. Okay, now you're book smart. Then go get the oral tradition. Interview Talmidei Chachamim. Hear stories that they don't write in the art school books that you gotta hear behind closed doors. I have a friend whose father was very close to Rav Steinman. How did Rav Steinman deal with, people acting out with each other? What would he say to a bacher that was doing wrong things with another bacher in yeshiva? These are maybe not written in the regular books you buy, but of course they dealt with these things. Those are not new issues. Don't fool yourself. These are issues that are around for a long time, and all the Talmidei Chachamim and Tzaddikim talk about them, but you gotta go out and get that tradition. Okay, so you read the books, you got the tradition, here's the next step. There's gonna be new things we said that are invented that the Chavetz Chaim never spoke about, Reb Chaim Ozer never spoke about, the Friediger Rebbe, whatever it is, whatever type of Judaism you ascribe to, and the Baba Sali, and whoever you are and wherever you come from, they didn't speak about new things. So what do? So the step is, you try to anticipate what they would have said according to all the book knowledge that you have and according to the tradition that you have from your teachers and their teachers. You try to say, okay, here's this new situation. It's never been before, but maybe there's a similar one that was around. Or maybe these Jewish leaders that inspire us and led us with such brilliance and clairvoyancy, maybe we have enough of an idea, hopefully, of the way they thought that we can do our best, God willing, and anticipate what they might have said about this new problem, about this new topic, about this new thing that was invented. And we daven for siyata d'shmaya, and we try our best. We speak to the living gedolim and tzaddikim today, and you can't do better than that. And at the end of the day, we're agents of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We're not maybe so great. We're such small people. But we work for Hashem, Not everybody is Jeff Bezos from Amazon, right? But in a certain sense, the Amazon fulfillment center employee, he represents Jeff Bezos in a certain way, right? And he wears maybe a certain uniform and acts in a certain way with certain conduct, right? So we represent the Kadosh Baruch Hu, so we're not so great. We're such small people. We're in the end of time. So much has been lost and forgotten in the gullus, and we're so twisted and confused, and our heads are filled with garbage. This is the worst possible time. I spoke to a big chashuv Talmud Chacham. It was 2 nights ago. Such a beautiful Talmud Chacham, a real brisker, Yiddish, English speaking, real like real brisker. I felt I was talking to the brisker Rav. And he said that he tells his brachim, he said, if I was born in the 2000s, I have no idea how I would have dealt with all the stuff that we have today. So if Hashem put you in this generation, you're clearly capable more than me. And hats off to you, and I'm going to give you understanding and appreciation for the stuff that you guys have to work out. I couldn't have stood a chance. Okay, that's what I heard from this Talmud Chacham. So I think when we talk about how should yeshivas deal with these topics, first of all, I can't tell yeshivas what to do, and they're way more chashuv than me. But in a general sense, I can convey to you what they told me, how they deal with it, and it's you get a tradition, you learn as much Torah as you can, and you anticipate what the tzaddikim would have said today about these topics. You consult with the living tzaddikim too, because we have some, and then you daven for siyata d'shmaya and you do your best. And this is one of the challenges of leadership. We're going to say one more point about leadership because it's very important, and then we're going to finish. On the one hand, you want to preserve mesora, tradition. And on the other hand, there are new challenges that tradition doesn't talk about, and you have to anticipate those and try to guess with the best guesstimate that you can what the tzaddikim would have said, like we just discussed. Okay. Look at a few examples in history. Look at Reb Shraga Feivel Mendelevitz, who I've been reviewing recently a book about his life. And he comes from Hungary to America in the early 1900s. The place is chaotic. The kashrus is in disarray. No taras hamishpacha. People aren't keeping Shabbos. It's completely crazy. And he tries to make a change. He tries to see what to do. And the regular system isn't working. And there's no shortage of Talmidei Chachamim, but for some reason there's cultural challenges and whatever it was at that time that I didn't live that I can't so much understand. But things weren't going, and whatever the old techniques were to deal with old problems, they weren't fixing the new problems. So he says, I'm inspired by Reb Shamshon Mufal Hershel. We have his farm that way too, near Reb Nachman's actually. Are they similar? I have to think about that. Different video. But he says, Reb Shamshon Mufal Hersh, he said, was a great Torah visionary. He was a brilliant leader. And he was able to see the Haskalah movement and look far, far, far ahead and say, okay, this is what's going on. We can make a decision to just, make a little enclave of 6.5 Jews that keep Torah the way we always did and cancel everybody else. We could do that. Or maybe I have to change the rules of engagement and do something new to save Klal Yisrael. So that's what Reb Shamshon Mufal Hersh did. And some people say, I heard recently from a Talmud Chacham a few months ago, very interesting point. He said Reb Volba did that. He was the Reb Shamshon Mufal Hersh that transitioned from the old generation to the new generation. Very interesting thing to say. Also, video for another time. If you learn Reb Volba's farm, you'll smile and you'll maybe understand what we're talking about. So Reb Shraga Feivel Mendelevitz said, we got to start a yeshiva. We have to have secular studies in the yeshiva. We have to have all sorts of new things that maybe it was different in Hungary. It was different in Lithuania. It was different in Poland. But we're not there. We're not in Kansas anymore. We're not there. We're here. And so we have to take from the past and blend it with the future and do our best and there's a concept like that, and Hashem should give us siyata d'shmaya. Look at Sarah Schneer, and she lived in a time of the biggest gedolim in the last 100 years, and she lived in the time of the Chavetz Chaim, and she lived in the time of Reb Chaim Moshe Grudzinski. She lived in the time of the Ger Rebbe and all these people, and she said, well, something really bad is happening, and it's just going to get way worse, but Hashem put this idea in my head. And she didn't say, oh, I'm just a woman, I have nothing to offer. And she didn't say, well, if only I have this idea and no one else does, it must be a bad idea. She didn't do that either. She went and she researched and she interviewed people bigger than herself. And they started to get approval for this idea. And the old ways weren't fixing the new problem, but the new way fixed the new problem. So again, it wasn't spun on her own volition, and she didn't just make that up on her own. She worked in tandem with Gedolei Yisrael and got their support and got their direction. And it was a collaborative thing. But she was given siyata d'shmaya, and because of that today, I am here. My mother is religious, my daughters are religious, my wife is religious, right? So there's this game, this challenge of old and new, blending that together, and people that are alive today having the siyata d'shmaya, doing their best and figuring out what that is. You know, comes to mind a letter from the Chassam Sofer. It's kind of a dangerous thing to say, so I'm going to disclaim that it can be misunderstood, and really I probably shouldn't have mentioned it because I have to go explain a whole topic in that. But one time the Chassam Sofer was writing a tshuva, a halacha responsa about a very complex halachic topic, and he didn't even look in any of his sfarim. And the Chassam Sofer, his son, who was also a very great person, looked at him and said, I think my Chassam Sofer Taurus Moshe is behind me in one of these shelves. The Chassam Sofer said, Abba, I don't understand how you can write such serious halachic answers to questions, one after the other, and not research this for weeks in a row. So Chassam Sofer says, what could I do? I get so many letters, and I'm one of the greatest experts in this generation for answering these questions. So I have to try to keep up with what's going on and answer things that nobody else can answer. That's my responsibility. But I don't have time to take 2 or 3 weeks to research each thing. I'm doing my best. So the Chassam Sofer said to his father, the Chassam Sofer, well, what if you make a mistake? He said, first of all, these are things that I learned so much. I know this stuff so well. But second of all, you can't do better than you can do. If Hashem put me in this generation and gave me this knowledge and gave me these talents, and I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm trying to do it l'shem shamayim, and I'm davening for siyata d'shmaya, I don't believe Hashem is now going to go out of his way to trip me up and mess over Klal Yisrael. You know, I'm going to have some siyata d'shmaya. And therefore, you know, I'm calm when I write that responsa, that unless something later on comes up and tells me I was wrong, it was okay what I wrote, and it was a satisfactory answer, and I did the right thing. You know, all these chazals and all these concepts about how you can only do what you can do. Hashem put us in this generation. He gave us these challenges, and we got to do the best that we can. And it's an uphill battle. We said in an earlier video, I think, but I'm not sure. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says in the Sefer Kadosh Yisrael, I think we have it on that shelf, he says that the Ridas Hadoros from generations used to be that there was like very great people and a little bit less great people and a little bit less great and a little bit less great. But he said in his time, Ridas Hadoros meant you're starting off sinning. You're starting off doing wrong things. That's how you start. It's like there's a starting line for a race. And, you know, and we're like 100 feet behind the starting line, and they shoot the shooting gun, right, where you start a race off with, whatever it's called, that gun. And everyone starts running ahead, but you started like 100 feet behind that line, and that's where you started. That's where we started when we were born into this generation. And it's not by accident. Hashem put us here, and we're able to do our best. And that's all we can do, and that's all that's all Hashem expects from us, and we're doing a great job. We should have siyata d'shmaya, but tradition is important. Davening to Hashem is important. Being mizdabek b'talmidei chachamim, being misafek ba'avar ragleim, doing shimush chachamim, talking to the greatest people that you know, interviewing them. I stand in line sometimes by great people. It takes my time. I wait half an hour, 40 minutes in line somewhere, trying to make appointments, and I sit down with these people and I say, you're way older than me, you're way greater than me, you have a tradition from the people before you. I'm dealing with this topic, I'm talking about that topic, I'm giving a lecture, in my work I had to deal with a certain thing. What does Rebbe say about this? Do you have stories about this? Do you have knowledge? Do you have a different perspective on this? You're not going to lose out, you're only going to gain. There's so much to learn, we're just trying to do our best. So I hope that answered. Okay, so this finishes shovevim. No more shovevim for now. Let's review the videos. If you didn't see all the videos, go back. They're great. The first videos on TFRP was about how much Hashem loves us. Then we had 2, I think, on friendship. We're going to get back to that one day. Then we had a bunch on Yetzer Hara, temptation, lust. Taking a break. Maybe I'm going to ask for your guys' participation to help get the videos out more, because we make these videos, we put in the time and money. I pay for this. And it should just be Mazaka people, and we should be besimcha and be validated and be the greatest people we can be. And, this is the greatest thing we can do for one another and to grow together. So maybe it'll help me to share some of the videos and let people know about it. And then we're going to, Be'ezer Hashem, Bli Neder, we're going to make nicer videos, maybe even video on a nice camera like this, and to move into trauma, grief, loss, meaning, amuna, bitachon, faith, etc., etc., etc. Thank you guys. Thank you for everything. We should keep growing together. It's such a pleasure. There's so many special people that we're all in this together, and I'm feeling the energy. We're all growing. It's very exciting. Thank you for everything.